Wedding vows shattered by a vindictive sister's betrayal, sparking a bitter fate. I still remember the chill in the air on that fateful morning, when the promise of a new beginning collided with the weight of betrayal. My name is Clara Bellamy, and at 27 I had dreamed of a wedding filled with hope and love. Instead, I found myself entangled in a web of deceit spun by those I once called family. This is the story of how my own sister, Pamela, and our parents' misguided loyalty turned what should have been a celebration of love into a saga of silent revenge and heartache. The wedding of broken promises. In the months leading up to my wedding, every detail had been meticulously planned. I envisioned a day of laughter, joyous tears, and the warm embrace of loved ones. Evan, my gentle and steadfast fiancé, and I had spent nearly 4 years building our relationship on trust and shared dreams. Our engagement was a promise not only to each other but to the future we hoped to create. A future that, unbeknownst to me then, would soon be overshadowed by betrayal. Pamela Bellamy, my elder sister, was 30 and forever the beloved child in our family's eyes. Growing up, Pamela's presence had always loomed large over my quiet existence. Our parents, Margaret and Edward, dotes on her and had seemingly placed her happiness above all else. While I quietly nurtured my own dreams, she thrived on the adoration of our family and the praise that followed her every move. Yet beneath her soft-spoken exterior, I always sensed a simmering darkness, a need for control and validation that bordered on obsession. When the invitations went out for my wedding, I expected an overwhelming turnout from our extended family. Instead, I began to notice gaps, missing names, unanswered phone calls, and a creeping silence that chilled me more than the autumn wind ever could. I later learned that Pamela, in the midst of her own crumbling marriage with her then-husband Andrew, had been quietly persuading our parents and select relatives not to attend. She argued that it was inappropriate for me to celebrate my union while she was embroiled in the pain of a failing relationship. Her rationale, thinly veiled in concern, was in reality a calculated attempt to shield her wounded pride. I had never been close to her. Our childhood quarrels had given way to an uneasy coexistence built on avoidance rather than affection. Yet nothing prepared me for the venom she would unleash as she sabotaged what should have been the happiest day of my life. On the morning of the wedding, as I stood in my delicate lace gown in front of a mirror, I could feel the absence of warmth in the atmosphere. The room, filled with excited anticipation just hours before, now resonated with a foreboding silence. I tried to brush aside the feeling. Perhaps it was merely the jitters before a big moment. But as the day unfolded, every missing smile and every empty seat in the pews told me that something was terribly amiss. Only a handful of close relatives and a few supportive cousins had honored their invitation. The rest, I later discovered, had been swayed by whispered rumors and insinuations carefully planted by Pamela herself. Throughout the ceremony, as Evan and I exchanged our vows beneath the ornate arches of the old estate, a part of me was distracted by a gnawing sense of abandonment. I recalled the hushed conversations among guests, the strained expressions of those who should have been celebrating with us. In the midst of the laughter and the clinking of glasses during the reception, I could not shake the feeling that I was being subtly ostracized, a bride betrayed not by a stranger, but by someone I once trusted. Pamela's act of treachery was not a spur-of-the-moment lapse. It was the culmination of years of rivalry and simmering resentments. I remembered how, even as children, we had clashed incessantly. While I had been content to fade into the background, Pamela demanded the spotlight. In every family gathering, every birthday, and every holiday, she was the one who shone brightly, while I was relegated to the background. Over time, the embers of that childhood rivalry had grown into a slow-burning animosity, a grudge that neither of us had ever truly resolved. As I looked around at the few familiar faces gathered that day, I resolved to let the celebration carry on despite the undercurrent of sorrow. Evan's warm smile and the gentle reassurances from my in-laws helped to mask the deep-seated hurt inside me. Still, the wounds of that day would not fade so easily. I left the reception with a bittersweet memory. The echoes of broken promises mingled with the laughter of friends who chose to stand by me. 2. The aftermath and the unwanted reunion. Time marched on in its relentless fashion, and I tried desperately to move forward with my life. The wedding, though marred by the absence of family, had become a distant, painful memory, a chapter best left closed. But fate, it seems, has a way of reopening old wounds when one least expects it. Not long after the wedding, Evan and I joyfully announced on social media that I was in the second trimester of our first pregnancy. It was a moment meant to herald a new beginning, a fresh start for my heart and soul. I had envisioned this time as a period of quiet happiness, where the promise of new life would fill the void left by the shattered bonds of the past. However, the announcement quickly ignited a powder keg of long-buried resentments. Within hours of sharing the news, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Messages flooded in from those who had been absent on my wedding day, and from those who suddenly wished to mend what had been broken. My parents, Margaret and Edward, reached out in a tone that dripped with feigned contrition. They admitted that they had allowed their favoritism toward Pamela to cloud their judgment, and apologized for the exclusion I had suffered. But their apology was soon tainted by an absurd proposal, a proposal that I could only describe as both shocking and surreal. They suggested, with all the disarming politeness of a rehearsed script, that since Pamela was unable to conceive despite multiple failed IVF cycles, perhaps it would be beneficial for our family if she could share in the joy of raising my child.
Subscribe now. Join us today.
In their eyes, this arrangement would not only provide me with extra support but would also offer Pamela a chance to experience motherhood indirectly. They went so far as to speculate that my baby might have two mothers, an idea that struck me as disturbingly reminiscent of a twisted fairy tale where love is bartered like a commodity. On that fateful call, I could see through every veneer of contrition. With a voice that trembled with both anger and sorrow, I told them in no uncertain terms that I would never allow such a farcical arrangement to take root in my life. I explained that my child was not a plaything to be passed around on the whim of those who had hurt me. My words, though measured, were laced with the years of pent-up bitterness that had accumulated from countless betrayals. I reminded them that my wedding had been sabotaged by Pamela, a sister whose actions had been nothing short of vengeful, and that my baby deserved a life free from the toxicity of that manipulation. Their reply was immediate and predictable. They labeled my stance as harsh and unreasonable, insisting that Pamela was merely volunteering to help and that their suggestion was nothing more than an innocent act of familial support. I countered by noting that Evan, his family, and my close friends already provided all the assistance I needed. I declared that if they had no difficulty excluding me in the past, then they should continue to do so without expecting me to sacrifice my dignity now. In that moment, as the conversation veered further into accusations and recriminations, I felt an irreversible line being drawn, a line that I was no longer willing to cross. I told them that if my pain was too much for them to bear, then they should keep their distance. And so, with a heavy heart and a soul numbed by years of deception, I ended the call. 3. Echoes of the past. In the days following that call, my phone did not stop ringing. Messages and texts poured in from various family members. Some demanded that I apologize for my needless and unkind words, while others reminded me that I had always been prone to overreact. Yet, every message only served as a painful reminder of what had transpired. I could still recall, in vivid detail, the moments leading up to my wedding, the hushed discussions, the cold stares, the unspoken collusion that had conspired to rob me of my day. The deep animosity I harbored toward Pamela was now laid bare, and I felt no remorse for having spoken the truth. I found myself revisiting old memories, tracing the roots of our discord back to our childhood. Pamela and I had never truly been sisters in the way one might imagine. While I had always been the quiet, obedient child, she had been the wild, attention-seeking one, the golden child our parents adored. Even as the years passed and our paths diverged, that dynamic remained unchanged. Our interactions were marked by a persistent undercurrent of rivalry and resentment, and her actions at my wedding were merely an extension of a lifelong pattern. I recalled a particular conversation from years ago, when I was trying to understand the seemingly inexplicable behavior of my sister. During one family dinner, as we discussed future plans and hopes, Pamela had casually mentioned that her marriage with Andrew was built on a mutual understanding, a shared decision to forego having children. I was present, yet her words were delivered with a nonchalance that belied their significance. Even then, it was clear that Pamela had always desired children, despite professing to accept a childless life. In her mind, the promise of motherhood was something that could be manipulated, delayed, or, as it turned out, forever denied by her own actions. I had kept these recollections locked away, knowing that dredging them up would only deepen the divide between us. It wasn't long before the full scope of Pamela's manipulation became undeniable. My parents eventually informed me that, following a particularly bitter argument, Pamela had returned to live with them permanently. They insisted that there was no alternative for her, that the emotional toll of her crumbling marriage had left her with nowhere else to go. The news came as a cruel irony, at a time when I was preparing to step into a new phase of my life. My sister's failures and our parents' favoritism were thrust back into the spotlight, each twist in the tale more heartbreaking than the last. And then came the day that would reopen the final wound of that ill-fated wedding. A year after the ceremony, as Evan and I were enjoying a quiet lunch at a small cafe, we unexpectedly crossed paths with Andrew, Pamela's ex-husband. His presence was as disarming as it was unexpected. With a cautious smile and a hint of regret in his eyes, he approached our table. He offered his congratulations on our wedding and expressed genuine sorrow for having missed the celebration. He explained, almost as if confessing a long-held secret, that his absence had been directly tied to Pamela's behavior. He spoke of how, in the run-up to our wedding, Pamela had repeatedly postponed mediation sessions and delayed finalizing her divorce by claiming that she was too preoccupied with the preparations for my wedding. When he learned that she hadn't even attended our ceremony, his disappointment was palpable. Sitting there, listening to Andrew's account, I felt an unsettling mixture of vindication and sorrow. His version of events painted a stark picture of a woman whose every action was driven by a desperate need for control, a need that had cost her not only her marriage but, perhaps, the chance to ever be a nurturing mother. He recalled a particularly disturbing incident, when during one of their bitter arguments about whether to have children, Pamela had nonchalantly admitted that she had secretly stopped taking her birth control pills. Her rationale was as chilling as it was reckless. She believed that by forcing a pregnancy upon Andrew, she could coerce him into embracing the idea of fatherhood. His voice, heavy with disbelief and regret, confirmed what I had long suspected. Pamela's actions were not simply acts of sibling rivalry or petty vengeance. They were the manifestations of a deeply troubled soul, a soul that, in her pursuit of validation, had destroyed everything in her path.
Subscribe now. Join us today.
Andrew's revelations left me with more questions than answers. How could someone I once regarded as family be so consumed by her own selfish desires that she would manipulate the lives of others for a chance at motherhood? And yet, as painful as his words were, they brought with them a clarity that I had desperately sought for years. The truth, however bitter, had finally emerged from the shadows, and I realized that the path to healing lay in acknowledging that truth, even if it meant accepting that some wounds might never fully mend. For the storm of social media and lingering resentments. In today's world, no secret remains hidden for long. The joyful news of my pregnancy, once a beacon of hope, soon became a rallying point for renewed conflict. Almost immediately after my announcement, social media exploded with messages, some of genuine congratulations, others laced with thinly veiled criticism. I discovered that my post had become fodder for my estranged family's latest bid to rewrite history. It seemed that my parents and Pamela had formed an unholy alliance, using every digital channel available to spin a narrative that painted me as the ungrateful, spiteful daughter responsible for tearing apart the family. Their online posts were relentless. They claimed that I was the architect of Pamela's ruined marriage, that my words during our recent phone call were cruel and uncalled for, and that I had always been predisposed to lashing out. Even as supportive messages from friends and a few loyal relatives poured in, I could not help but feel isolated in the midst of this digital onslaught. Every comment, every shared post, felt like another brick in the wall that now separated me from the family I had once known. Over the ensuing weeks, the barrage of texts and emails became almost unbearable. Relatives who had once stood by me now demanded that I retract my statements and apologize for kicking someone when they were already down. Each message was a stark reminder that the wounds of the past were still fresh, and that forgiveness was being offered not out of genuine remorse but as a means to restore a semblance of normalcy. An illusion, I realized, that I was no longer willing to entertain. I often found myself reflecting on the nature of forgiveness. Was it a gift that could be freely given, or was it a concession that signaled weakness? In the depths of my heart, I knew that the words I had spoken were born of a lifetime of hurt, a truth that I could neither deny nor wish away. To those who accused me of cruelty, I had only this to say: the pain of being abandoned on the very day I vowed to begin a new chapter was too great to be softened by empty apologies. I could not, allow myself to sacrifice my self-respect for the sake of a reconciled family that had proven time and again to value appearances over authenticity. Then, as if fate itself sought to prolong the agony, came another twist. My parents and Pamela, having watched the social media drama unfold, finally reached out once more. In a flurry of emails and messages, they offered apologies, but with a condition that struck me as the ultimate betrayal. They demanded that I remove the post that had exposed the truth of everything that had transpired. Their words were laced with threats and pleas, as if the digital record of my pain was a stain that needed erasure for their own sake. They insisted that if I truly cared about preserving our family, I would comply and let bygones be bygones. I responded with quiet finality. I told them that I would not remove the post until I felt it was right to do so, that my integrity and the sanctity of my truth were not up for negotiation. I reminded them that the post was not intended to hurt for the sake of hurting. It was meant to shed light on a painful reality, a reality that they had helped create. In that moment, as I pressed send on my reply and blocked their numbers, I felt a bittersweet liberation. I was severing the last fragile ties that bound me to a family whose love had always been conditional, whose apologies were mere currency for regaining control. Eventually, though not without great reluctance, I did remove the post, not out of submission, but rather as an act of self-preservation. I had no desire for my social media space to become a constant battleground for a war that had long since taken its toll on my soul. My decision to let go of the digital drama was not an act of defeat, but a conscious choice to reclaim the joy and peace that I desperately needed during my pregnancy. Embracing a future beyond the shadows. In the quiet hours of the early morning, as the world slept and the remnants of the night's digital skirmishes faded into memory, I found myself reflecting on the tumultuous journey that had brought me to this moment. The echoes of that fateful wedding, the bitter phone calls, the barrage of texts, and the heart-wrenching confrontations, all had left indelible scars on my heart. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there was a spark of hope, a belief that the future could be rewritten, that my child and I could forge a path defined not by the betrayals of the past, but by the resilience of the human spirit. Evan's unwavering support had been my anchor through these stormy times. His gentle reassurances, his ability to make me laugh even when tears threatened to spill, and the quiet strength of his presence reminded me that true love was not bound by the failings of others. With him by my side, I began to envision a life free from the ghosts of betrayal, a life where my unborn child would be nurtured in an environment of genuine care, far removed from the toxic influences that had marred my past. I started to seek solace in the small, meaningful moments, the soft glow of sunrise on a quiet morning, the warmth of a shared cup of coffee with a true friend, the simple pleasure of feeling my baby's gentle kicks as a reminder of new life. Each of these moments was a step towards healing, a quiet rebellion against the chaos that had once threatened to consume me. I resolved that my pregnancy would be a time of celebration, a sanctuary where I could rebuild my sense of self and craft a future that was entirely my own. Yet, even as I embraced this newfound resolve,
Subscribe now. Join us today.
a part of me remained haunted by the specter of what had transpired. There were nights when I would lie awake, replaying every word exchanged during that long phone call with my parents, every biting text that had arrived in the aftermath. I questioned whether I had been too harsh, whether perhaps there was a way to mend the broken bonds without sacrificing the truth. But, deep down, I knew that forgiving without acknowledging the hurt would be a betrayal of my own journey, a journey marked by the painful realization that sometimes, family is not the haven we expect it to be. I had come to understand that true healing was not about erasing the past but about learning to live with its scars. The memories of that shattered wedding, the cold indifference of relatives who had once claimed to love me, and the calculated cruelty of Pamela's betrayals were all part of the tapestry of my life. And while I wished I could forget them, I knew that each scar told a story of resilience, of survival, and of the strength required to stand up against those who would manipulate love for their own gain. The final twist in this saga came quietly, almost imperceptibly. After months of isolation from those who had once been so close, I began to receive messages from a few distant cousins and family friends. They expressed sympathy for my plight, and in hushed tones, admitted that they too had been misled by the carefully crafted narrative of our parents and Pamela. Their words, though few and far between, offered a glimmer of reassurance, that even in a family fractured by lies, there remained a core of truth and compassion. It was in these small gestures of kindness that I found the strength to move forward. Today, as I stand on the threshold of motherhood, I carry with me the bittersweet legacy of a past that has both scarred and shaped me. I know that I will never fully forget the pain of that day, nor will I ever completely absolve those who wronged me. But I have also learned that my worth is not defined by the actions of others. It is defined by the love I give, the strength I muster, and the future I choose to create. My child will grow up knowing that love is not always easy, that truth can be painful, and that sometimes the bravest act is to walk away from the toxic remnants of the past. I have chosen to let go of the hope that Pamela, with her relentless need for validation and control, will ever change. I have accepted that our paths diverged long ago, and that my journey, one filled with both heartbreak and hope, must now be walked alone, alongside those who truly care. As for my parents, their attempts to reconcile seem less about genuine remorse and more about their desperate desire to restore a semblance of the family they once knew. I have no illusions about their motives, and I have decided that I will no longer allow their self-serving apologies to dictate the course of my life. Epilogue. A future defined by truth and resilience. Now, with each passing day, I choose to focus on what truly matters, the promise of new life, the unwavering support of a partner who loves me unconditionally, and the inner strength that has carried me through the darkest of times. I stand here not as a victim of betrayal, but as a woman who has emerged from the ruins of shattered promises with a heart that still dares to hope. There are moments when the memory of that ill-fated wedding resurfaces, a quiet reminder of a time when family turned its back on love and loyalty. But I have learned to let those memories fuel my determination rather than weigh me down. I will not allow the ghosts of the past to define my future. My child will know a home filled with genuine affection, laughter, and the kind of support that comes not from obligation, but from heartfelt connection. To those who once tried to control my destiny with whispered lies and calculated schemes, I say this: your attempts to shape my life have failed. I am the author of my own story now, a story of resilience, self-respect, and the unyielding courage to choose my own happiness. I have forgiven not out of weakness, but out of the understanding that holding on to the past would only rob me of the joy that awaits in the future. As I look forward to the arrival of my baby, I am filled with a quiet conviction that love, real, honest, and unconditional love, will guide me through the uncertainties ahead. I know that there will be challenges yet to come, that the scars of betrayal may sometimes ache in the quiet moments of the night. But I also know that I have the strength to face them, that I have built a fortress around my heart with the support of those who truly matter, and that the promise of a brighter tomorrow shines even in the darkest of times. I leave behind the ghosts of my past, Pamela, Margaret, Edward, and all the painful echoes of a family torn apart by deceit. In their stead, I embrace a future defined by truth and resilience, a future where my child and I can heal together. The journey has been long, the wounds deep, but I have learned that sometimes the most powerful act of love is to let go of what no longer serves you, to walk away from toxicity, and to build something new from the ashes. And so, as I stand on the brink of a new chapter in my life, I do so with a heart that, though scarred, beats with the promise of hope. I have chosen to reclaim my narrative, to embrace the love that surrounds me, and to create a life that is unequivocally my own. This is not just the story of a sabotaged wedding or a family torn by betrayal. It is the story of a woman who, despite every hardship, dared to dream of a better tomorrow and found the strength to make that dream a reality. May the future be kind, may the past remain a lesson, and may every new beginning be a testament to the power of truth, love, and unwavering resilience. In the quiet aftermath of chaos, I have learned that every scar tells a story not of defeat, but of survival. And as I move forward, I do so with the firm belief that the most precious gift.
Subscribe now. Join us today. Enter beyond reality, where enchanting story times, thrilling mysteries, and timeless adventures ignite your imagination. Subscribe now. Join us today.